Welcome to the show, Mind Matters, where your mind matters. Today on the show, we have Larry Jones. Welcome to the show, Larry. Thanks for coming on today.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Larry, what do you do?
So I am a clinical specialist, is what they call us, a therapist over at for the Marines.
Awesome. That's good stuff. What'd you get your degree in?
In clinical mental health counseling.
That's good stuff. So we're going to start with a little bit of intro, let everyone know where you're from, what you're about. So let's start with your origin story. What are you all about? Where are you from?
Oh, man. So I'm from Richmond, Virginia, which is not what it used to be. It's a hipster town now. It used to be a really bad area. So that's the time that I grew up in, was when it was a bad area. Then I actually made it out of the hood. Went to undergrad at Oral Roberts University, graduated from there with a graphic design degree, which is not at all what I do now. I found out that it was going to be a little bit different to be able to survive in that field. And so I ended up moving into something that I actually do enjoy, which is now what I'm doing currently as a counselor.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what was the big shift to get over to mental health?
Oh, boy. In which way?
Big swing from digital art and things of that nature over to mental health career field.
That's interesting. So one of the jobs that I took once I finished undergrad was with a health insurance company. And I actually learned then what it was like to see people as numbers. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Because I saw that there were people who were going through some stuff, and to see them relegated to just being a serial number. There was absolutely no care for who they were as a human or what they were going through. And so I think that kind of started the push towards, trying to do something to take care of people. And so I had already decided that I was going to go back to school. I actually made a little pact with God that I'm gonna go back to school in 5 years after undergrad. And so that time came up, even though I was making some okay money. That was at the same time everybody was getting laid off. All the companies were downsizing. And so it just kind of moved me right into that field. He was like, "Hey, remember that deal you made? It's time, buddy. Let's get it going." Yeah. So moved right into this field, started trying to get my degree so that I could start actually helping.
That's awesome. I think that's a well-rounded, good origin story. We're going to transition into the warm-up. So in all sports, got to love some sports references. Got to get warmed up. Normally warming up the muscles in the bullpen. Here, we're going to warm up our mouths a little bit. So got a few questions to get us started. First one I got for you is, what has been your least favorite job to date?
Oh, yeah. So that would definitely be working. It was actually my very first job. I worked at Subway. I was a sandwich artist. Yeah, that was when we went by that title. And I worked there all of 2 weeks. It did not last very long. So we worked. I remember my manager, she used to always yell at us, "Fast, fast, hurry, hurry." I don't know what the deal was, why we had to make these sandwiches so quickly. But boy, she was serious about it. Make it quicker. So we were always trying to make these sandwiches. And I learned that the tuna fish, you should definitely stay away from it. It's been around a lot longer than you think. There's that. But we actually had some threats come in to Subway, of all places. Guy came in, he threatened the manager. And I said, "You know what? If he comes back, I want to not be here." So I went ahead that day. I decided I'm just going to go ahead and quit this job. It was already not that great, wasn't paying that great. And now threats of violence. Nah, I don't need to make these sandwiches that bad.
It's not worth it.
Not at all.
That's funny. One of the jobs I liked the least was working at Honda. I sold cars for a single month. So funny. I remember, I love people. I love cars. This is going to be the match. Yeah. This is going to be the thing. I was so excited. And she's selling cars, is tricking people, and a lot of just not good stuff. Basically, everything you think of with used car dealership, even though, I mean, this was a new car dealership, but just a lot of stuff that happens in the background. I just couldn't do it. So I did that 1 month and took that one and only paycheck and got out of there. Unfortunately, wasn't quite the match. But it's funny how you think it's going to be better than it is.
Yeah, I think I did the exact same thing. I worked for Ford for I think I made it 2 months. Because the training was 1 month and then I was on the floor for 2 months. And exact same thing, man. You just feel like, oh, we've built this great relationship, and I'm gonna be the dealer that you believe in, because I'm not trying to pull wool over your eyes. And then you discover the finance manager, he's gonna want you to pull that wool. It's like, this isn't gonna be a good fit.
It's funny, some of the tricks they got in there, but we won't go too far into used cars. Oh, go and tell him something real quick. Stall. Next question I got. What habits do you have to make sure you're taking care of? So on here it says mental health. One thing I'm going to try to do in this podcast going forward, I just recently heard it on another podcast, is calling it mental fitness. And I absolutely loved it. So I'm going to try to do that going forward. Mental health has a lot of negative connotations. So this idea of mental fitness, ongoing, it's never complete, it's never done, and we're always working on it. So what are some of the things you do to take care of your mental fitness?
So I am all about having as many different ways of unwinding as possible. I like to just grab new hobbies all the time. And it's not that I necessarily will put an old one down. It's just that I like to add tools to the tool belt. I'm a car guy. So I like to always have as many tools as possible so you can make sure the job gets done. And so I got into photography. I got into RC cars because that's something random that I needed to do. So I did. Obviously, I like to wrench on my own car, but now I have a van because I'm a super cool guy. So, there's that. But yeah, it's all about having as many ways to unwind as possible. And I try to make sure that I'm actively doing those things. You bring up mental fitness, and one of the things that we have to deal with a lot of times is help the worried well, is what they're called. So it's not necessarily people who are unfit and they're, sick minds, depraved and all this, but people who are just stressed out, and I think one of the things that helps us to just get stressed out is we put down the things that help us to just simply unwind on a Tuesday. And so if that means picking up a camera, then I'll do that,
Yeah, and I think going to your reference of the cars, for anybody that does like to tinker on their cars, is finding the right fit for the job. Because I know working on cars, sometimes you can grab something that will work, maybe, but finding the exact tool that fits, I think is a good analogy here, because maybe you need to find something that doesn't work for other people, but it works for you, and kind of finding that match. Because I know sometimes we like to come up with these solutions that are cookie cutter and, everyone should meditate or play video games, whatever. That's impossible. Everyone's completely different and whatnot. So the vice grip that might work for one job or person might be a completely different, a wrench or something for somebody else. So that's a good point. Making sure that you're having lots of stuff, lots of tools in the toolbox, so you're pulling out hopefully the one that works for that particular situation.
Yeah.
So slight tangent here, but want to ask you a hot question, see if I can get some good answers here. Hopefully this won't throw you too much, but 3-part question. So some fun stuff. I think it's important to understand how you use your time. So we went through your origin story and a little bit about you, but one way in a very short amount of time, since we only have an hour or less to kind of talk through some stuff, is understanding how you use your time. I think that really helps us understand you as a person. So right now, what's one app that you're using, one book you recommend, and one podcast or something similar?
Oh my gosh. Oh man. So that's interesting. So, okay. One app that I use. Do
you use it to unwind on that random Tuesday?
Wow. Okay, that's a tough one. So I was trying to not say this answer, but I guess why not? So obviously I'm a Christian. I made a reference to God earlier. And so I actually got into my Bible app, and I'm trying to do the Bible in a year because I've never actually done it before. And so I'm actually having it read to me, and I'll do that on my way to work. And for whatever reason, it's just, I mean, call it, the power of God maybe, but it's definitely just helped me to kind of get my mind together somehow. Like, it's not that I'm going to a Bible study at work, because I'm not, but somehow it just puts me in a good mood. It's a nice start, and I feel like I'm getting somewhere, growing as a person, to achieve a goal that I've wanted to achieve. Other than that, it's just going to be YouTube, so I just try to, make it something that actually matters. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that's helping to build me.
That's good stuff. So a book that you recommend?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
Doesn't have to be now, maybe ever.
Let's see. There is a book. Oh man, what's the name of it? See, you would catch me like this. Oh man, what's the name of it? So there's a book. I'd have to pull it up.
Okay.
So there's this book that I started reading called "The Body Keeps the Score." And I'm gonna get his name wrong. It's just gonna happen, but I'm gonna just throw it out there, and hopefully it'll be easy to spell if I say it wrong. Bessel A. Vanderkolk. Hopefully you can spell that, but it's actually pronounced, if I'm thinking about it correctly, Wessel A. Vanderkirk is how you say his name, but it's spelled Vanderkolk, Kolk. But anyway, the book is about trauma and how when you go through something that's super traumatic, even though you don't think about that thing, you still tend to respond to stuff that looks like that trauma. So if you got beat up in high school, we'll say beat up in elementary school, and it was in the park, randomly as an adult, you may hate going to the park, simply because your body remembers this is where that thing happened that was super traumatic to me. So really good book. I love the way it goes into some things and explains some stuff in a way that layman, somebody without any sort of knowledge of mental health can understand it, but it's also helpful for a person like myself who actually has to deal with trauma regularly. Yeah.
So what was your biggest takeaway? What's something that someone could take and use it as a tip, trick, technique, or something actionable from the book?
I think it's recognizing triggers. So it speaks about it a lot, actually, but those things that you just don't realize are happening, that your body does, And
you can't do anything until you know.
Exactly, because the triggers.
You do certain things, but it might not be getting at the root.
Exactly.
Of the problem.
So if you start, some deep breathing or something, well, what are you trying to resolve? Do you even know what took you there before you had to start deep breathing? What was the thing that's happening? Are you feeling hot? Is your chest tight? What is happening in your body that you can recognize, so that you can change what you do afterwards, or change how you respond to that situation?
Absolutely. We're going to round out the last question. If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, it would definitely be special butter chicken. I don't know how this thing has taken over every part of me. I love it. I can't get enough. Special butter chicken and naan. I don't know. It's special.
Gotta love some Indian food.
Oh my gosh.
Good stuff. I heard you had a few questions for me to round out and finish up this warm up.
Yeah. Let's see. So, I wanted to ask, what's your favorite artist?
My favorite artist. Oh shoot, that's a tough one. I don't know. I feel like that's really difficult because I like a lot of different things, and a lot of things are based on the mood or what's going on. Yeah. So, the crazy giant guitar solos while I'm working out or whatnot versus being in the car. The band that I've seen more than any other is Silverstein. So I've seen them quite a few times. I've also seen A Perfect Circle, which is like the quieter version of Tool. Both of those were pretty good. So I'd probably say between one of those two, I guess.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Oh, the memories with listening to Tool, the cries of the carrots.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, what has been going on in your life recently that you expected and didn't expect?
I think the biggest thing would probably be my transition to where I'm working at right now in the front office as the executive officer for the med group. It's been pretty interesting. I knew at some point I was going to probably become the exec, just because as a medical service corps officer, being an admin type person, we normally rotate in that position. I didn't want to because I never saw myself as an admin person. I'm more wanting to hang out with the people and kick boxes and do the jobs that are a little more hands-on. So far up to this point, my experience has been readiness and logistics. So I'm used to pushing boxes around logistics, and the readiness, like dragging around mannequins in a field with fake blood and, things that are very far away from like general admin, even though our job is, at its core, still admin, but a little more hands-on. And so I think I expected that aspect of it. And then the other half of that question is didn't expect. So I hate it a lot less than I thought I was going to.
Oh, wow.
I really thought that it was going to be very mundane and the same, because I was like, oh, Monday, same meetings every Monday, same meetings on Tuesday, and, working on the calendar, and, things are going to look very similar from day to day. Wow, that wasn't right. So we just get some random questions in there. If people don't know who to call, they call the front office and just rifle off the questions. So some of them don't even make any sense. One, it didn't happen here, but it's a good example. I'll always remember. The wing called over to me in medical readiness and then took the terms medical and readiness. They're like, oh, this must be the office it occurs within. And so they ask you this question. I have to listen to the question like 2 or 3 times. I'm like, this can't be happening. There was a solar eclipse that day, and they're like, do you have glasses for all 15,000 people on base? And I was like, no. They're like, you're medical, and you keep us ready. I'm like, you're using the words. I see what you're doing. That is where I work, but I don't have 15,000 pairs of glasses for the base. But
no blue blockers at the ready. Huh?
Yeah. And so, that didn't happen in this current position, but that does remind me of kind of the things. We get these random questions. I have no idea. I'm lucky enough to know the structure of the med group, which gets me by. I'm like, that's somewhere that sounds like flight med, so let me get you over to flight medicine. So in that aspect, I've really enjoyed it, where no day or hour has ever been like the same as the hour before. It's been absolutely insane, which is good for me. That's just kind of how my brain works. I thrive in the chaos. I love a little controlled chaos. So it's been good. So I definitely would say I expected to move into the position at some point. Didn't expect to like it as much as I am. And the other part I think I expected and didn't expect, kind of both, is how much you learn. And I say that because everyone says you learn so much in that position. And so it's one thing to hear it, but it's another thing to actually live it and really learn how much goes on behind the scenes and gets people promoted and all these different things, where a lot of times you fire off these documents, they disappear for a couple weeks, they come back signed, completed, done, but there's hours of review and things that are all happening behind the scenes. So I expected that I would learn a lot, but I don't know if I knew that I'd learn as much as I have. So it's been a really good time.
That's cool. That's cool. So you definitely strike me as a person who's outside of the box. Like, there's a whole lot going on. And I think that's an awesome trait. So it definitely leads me to this next question. That what would you like, for your listeners to know about you? What would you like to share with them?
I really hope that, the core of the podcast is making connections and making this conversation about mental fitness an ongoing thing. And I think that's the biggest thing. My hope, my want, my love for this is that we can have conversations and that becomes more of the norm. So in my pilot episode, I talked about losing my grandma to mental health and, the stigma of her not being able to talk to it, even to her own grandkids, none of us knew. And the stigma has gotten better over time, but we're still not where we need to be. When you go to the hospital for your annual physical, or if you roll an ankle, you get prevented or you get things to treat that. And there's, they send you right out the door. No one thinks about it. You're at the clinic. If someone sees you at the clinic, they're like, cool, no big deal. You go to the mental health clinic, then their mind starts to wander and things like that. So I think that's really what's on my mind to try to help share with listeners. Do I think this podcast will save and, fix mental health? No, not at all. But my biggest thing is I brought it up in a couple other forums. In my last base, I got a piece of our uniform approved. It was, not authorized initially, but I got a waiver to wear a patch on our shoulder that said, "Are you okay?" And I remember I had to go in and talk to the command chief about it. And one of the questions he asked me was, "Do you think this will solve mental health?" Basically, paraphrasing, not trying to quote him. But I remember I had to stop for a second and I had to give him an answer. I was like, "No, I don't think it would solve it. But what if it saved one person? One person. That's it. One person saw it on my arm and was like, "Hey, can I have a conversation? I'm at my lowest day. I'm at the worst part of my life. Can you, go to the BX with me and walk?" Yeah. Sure. That uniform adjustment, being slightly out of regulations or needing that waiver is all worth it just for one single person. So, I think that's what I would hope to share is I hope this podcast will make it so you could reach out to Larry or reach out to myself or anyone that's on here that has a story that's similar or made you think of something, or even if it just makes you make a call to someone. Digital age, we're really getting into text and different stuff, but just making an actual call, a FaceTime call, or even a voice call, maybe someone you need to check on, or maybe you need some help. Yeah. So that's what I'd say. I don't know if that was the road you were going for.
Oh man, that was beautiful. I'm impressed. That was great. So I got a bonus. So, what do people usually misunderstand about you?
Oh, this is a good one. Oh, this is good. So the biggest thing for me, my whole life has been happy-go-lucky, and that's kind of how I've lived my life for the majority of it. And then I had my bonus dad pass away when he was, still young, still had many years to live, passed away of lung cancer, didn't smoke. All of it seemed kind of unfair. But the big core out of that continued my philosophy of life is too short and to enjoy things. And so that's one thing I think that gets misconstrued a lot is I don't care or take things seriously. And maybe I joke and take things too far sometimes. But I still worry about stuff, and I've had the flights that I've had, I'm worrying about problems within the flight, and if there's been domestic incidences with people or other issues that have happened, DUIs or other things. I'm just racking my brain around how I can take care of them and what I did, and did I say enough? Did I say the right things? And so sometimes it's slightly frustrating where it's like happy-go-lucky is the outside. But that doesn't mean there's a lot of inner turmoil and having trouble sleeping. I'm doing a lot better now, but I've had periods of my life where my mind will not shut off no matter how hard I try. And so people see the smile and the, "Hey, how are you doing?" in the hallway. And I'll always do that. I mean, that's who I am at my core. I'm very blue if we go to the four lenses, and so wanting to take care of people. But sometimes it's a little frustrating. It's like, "Oh, you're always happy." I'm not always happy. I got things going on and things are racking through my brain, but I just keep going back to the life is too short. So unless it's something catastrophic or something pretty massive, there's not going to be too much that's going to wreck a day for me. I always think of those examples or memes or whatever it is where it talks about like the bank account in terms of seconds in the day. It associates like, would you give away this money? And you're like, no, I would never give away the money. And it's like, that's an hour of your day, basically. So you're going to feud and be all frustrated over what somebody said or how they, did something, and you're just giving away an hour. Another thing I try and tell my wife, and this is much easier said than done. I think I've gotten better at it, and I'm probably solidly mediocre at it now, is not worrying about something twice. So I already worry and, stay up, not being able to sleep, rack my brain over things. I try not to, but I do try to consciously stop and think about that. If I worry about it, then it's worrying about it once and then worrying about it again. So that doesn't really help at all. Worry about it when it comes. I'll handle it as it comes. But sometimes it does come off as like not caring, which is not the case.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that worry about it once. Oh boy, that's not easy.
Yeah. A lot of times things are going to come up. So you might as well wait till they occur before you worry about it. I was watching or listening to a podcast the other day, and I mentioned this in Holly's episode too, but I'll just hit it again, just because it's so powerful. But they studied the human brain. They put people in the machine to see what was firing and lighting up, and someone that is thinking about a argument suffers the exact same anxiety, and the exact same parts of the brain were lighting up between an actual argument and thinking about the argument. Yeah. That is crazy. Yeah. So it's the exact same thing, whether you are just playing it in your head, your body feels as if you were there. So you could go over and over, and there's something to be said for preparation, right? Prepare. If you are going to have a difficult conversation, preparing is good, but, balance. Everything in this life is about balance. So between preparation and, maybe obsessive.
Yeah. That keys me off onto something that I usually try to say with my clients is, when it comes to worry, you have to recognize where the fear is, if there's fear or if there's danger, because those are two separate things. So if you have a fear that something might happen, okay, well, analyze that fear. Where's it coming from? What's the deal there? Where does that take you? What's the next thing that you have to do to regulate that? But if it's danger, that's a whole nother thing. That's an act now, right? That's an act now situation. So, recognizing if it's just a fear, you can manage that. If it's get out of the way before the bus hits you, do that, right now. But I think letting it turn into a worry that continues to get at you, that's just that fear that doesn't do much to add to you, right? It's just something to take up your time, take up a whole lot of energy, and nothing really gets resolved. So, time to figure out a different way to handle that, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I guess that's back to the balance aspect, too, because in that same podcast I was listening to, she was mentioning that. It's funny you mentioned that. They use the reference of a snake. If there's a snake in front of you and it's about to bite you, you know exactly what to do. There's no thought. There's no whatever. You're out of the way. You're out of there. But she was referencing, like, if you're going hiking on a trail and you know that snakes are in the area. Yeah. So this goes back to the preparation versus like obsessive. So prepare, you look at the roads or you look at the routes, and maybe you take a route that is known to not have snakes, and or you take snake venom antidote or something. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but I think that's kind of tough, where you gotta, how much time are you spending on it? Because if you prepare, that's fine. But like, how far are you taking that? Like you said, I guess once it gets into disrupting your daily activities is where it starts to become more of a problem. We're going to transition. So for this one, since we're talking about mental fitness and we're blowing up this stigma, one thing I really wanted to dive in on this one is talking to a mental health, or I guess mental fitness professional. So if you could give us a brief description of your career field, and this is from someone that does it every day, not the Google version. I'm sure you could go and pull something up, and about.com is going to say this is what your day looks like. But from you, as an overview, what would you want people to know about mental health professionals?
Oh man. So I think what I would want people to know the most about mental health professionals is that a lot of us care. We're here. We're trying to make a difference. I can speak to the ones who are good at their job. That's who I would prefer to speak to, because I've only recently learned that they're quacks in every field, and this one I felt like, oh, maybe there's less. Apparently we have some, but one of the things that I definitely want to make sure people know is that they're worth going to get somebody who works for them. So we're out here, we're trying to make a change. There's this love. I'll speak for myself specifically. I love what I do because I get the opportunity to impact somebody's day and life. One of my mottos that I try to live by is I want to be the best part of your day, whoever you are. I want to be the best part of your day. And so this gives me the opportunity to not just be the best part of your day, but to be one of the best parts of your life potentially. If I can make somebody's life, first of all, continue, then that's great. And once you're already continuing, if I can make it a little bit better, raise your quality of life, then that's what I want to do. And there are a bunch of people who are like me, who are even better than me, who are out here, and we're all trying to make a difference and make some folks live a little bit better, a little bit more carefree, and not be under the thumb of their past or their boss or whatever's getting to them. There's ways around that. It may not immediately take you out of the situation, but there's ways to resolve those things that are holding you down.
So you said you want to be there on people's best day, but I'd venture to guess you want to be there on their worst day, don't you?
Oh, indeed. Yeah. Whatever I can do to make it better, I won't be so conceited as to believe that I am the best part of their day, but that doesn't mean that I don't have to try, you know? And so if you come to me broken, hey, let's get in this pot together. We can both cook for a little bit, if that'll help it to get better for you, so that's kind of, I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, that's funny. In my pilot episode, I mentioned that too. I mentioned, as odd as it sounds, I would love to be there on the good days, and I hope there's a lot more good days, but I'll love to be there, as weird as this sounds to say love and worst day in the same sentence, but I'd love to be there on the worst day, because I'd rather be there on your worst day and have somebody there with you.
Yeah.
So real quickly, this is probably pretty difficult, but can you sum up an average day? Walk us through what an average day looks like.
An average day.
It's probably not a thing. There's no average, is there?
There's a lot of paperwork. I'll say that. That's the average thing. That's the thing that I'm absolutely assured that I will have every day is paperwork. Ironically enough, that's actually the part of the day that I hate the most is the paperwork. I love sitting down with folks. And so that's kind of what I'm keying in on, as soon as I get to work, I'm like, okay, what paperwork do I need to get out of the way so that I can be completely ready for whoever comes through the door? So I'm an introvert as well. And so I always have to get over the fact that meeting new people is a problem for me. But it only takes about maybe 10 seconds, once that person sits down. So what brought you in? And I'm in there and I'm completely involved and I want to be there. So I think that's how my day goes every day is paperwork first, get that crap out of the way so I can do the stuff that actually matters to me. Hopefully that doesn't get me fired because I mess up on my paperwork.
So I do want to sort of back up, I think, a little bit. So what specialty, lack of a word that I don't know, are you in right now? Family counseling.
Oh, yeah. So because of my location, the military installation that I'm currently on, I tend to see the same type of issue. So I'm trained to handle a lot of different things, whether it's substance abuse or depression or even marital counseling or even theft prevention. It's like a super wide gamut. And so all these things I've done before, but the thing that I usually see the most is anxiety and depression. Just because that's the chapter of life, the most of the service members that I'm seeing are in, that early 20s, just kind of trying to figure out life. And so I'll usually handle that a lot. I'll get some marriage stuff in there, which is always that's one of my favorites, is helping married couples, to not just survive, but be happy. I think that matters. But yeah, I'll tend to see that. Was that the question? Did I answer that?
Yeah. So you're currently in that kind of family counseling, and you touched on some of them. Are there any others that are, I call them specialties, that's what we would call them, but focus areas, or did you kind of round out a lot of those with substance abuse and those?
So yeah, with those specialties, it's I'm trying to actually actively right now get better at some things that help to deal with traumas. There's something that I've been in love with, this special modality for treating people with trauma called EMDR, eye movement desensitization.
The thing that like bounces back and forth?
Yeah, so you're literally watching the light go back and forth, and you're thinking about that thing that horrible event or whatever that took place. And it's kind of like resetting a computer, which is why it's so interesting to me, because it's a different type of therapy from just, your usual talk therapy, to literally just make someone's brain reset in some ways, without actually having damage or losing, your phone unlock code or something like that. But helping somebody to get past something in a very different way. And it's been proven to be super successful. And so that's one of the things, the specialties that I'm trying to get into more of. But right now, I think the thing that I've been focusing on is how to help resolve anxiety, how to help resolve depression, because these are the things that I'm seeing the most, and definitely marriage, because I'd say those are the top three things that I'm dealing with the most.
That's awesome. So you touched on some of the things you enjoy. You enjoy taking care of and helping people and really having that conversation, getting past your introvertness, and then less desirable sounded like some paperwork, which I think a lot of us could identify with. And you also touched on some opportunities and highlighting what you do throughout your day and whatnot. What are some things about your job that most people don't understand?
Oh, boy.
Common misconceptions, the myths. Try to help and save everyone.
I think one of the most common misconceptions is, oh man, there's a couple. There's definitely a couple. So one of them is, when I'm off, man, I am off. And so it's super important to me to compartmentalize everything. And one of my favorite things is on my lunch, since we're so close to the beach, I like to go down there because I can be away from everybody. So nobody will bump into me and say, oh, Mr. Jones, let me talk to you about, well, please don't. Like, I literally need this. Like, I need this. So I think, just the thought that counselors are always on, we're not, man. We have hats. And we need those hats. We need those walls to make sure that none of this stuff bleeds over into our lives. We hear some horrible stories, and some of them stick with you, unfortunately. And so one of the ways that I have to combat that is to make sure that I'm doing what I can do to compartmentalize all of that. Going to the beach on my lunch break, that's one of those things. I told one of my clients, I said, if I happen to see you at one of the events that we were going to, if I happen to see you, you see me and I'm wearing Jordans, I'm not your counselor. I'm not your counselor. Don't bring up anything about that, because I don't know that. I don't know anything about it. But yeah, I think that's one of the main things, is that when we're off, we're off. Your counselors are doing some random things when they're not sitting in front of you, rock climbing, maybe they deliver flowers. It's just going to be some super random things, because we need to get out of that, so we don't burn out, because we're humans too.
Yeah, and I think having the boundaries is super important as well, because even if they wanted to reach out to you at some event or festival, it'd be pretty weird and awkward, like, hey, you're the one that did that, or, it's better to just, and so I hope that people don't see that as cold shoulder or is standoffish, but I think that's something that just has to occur. It just leaves it easier. Hi, how's it going? And then like on your way, because you do know each other, don't necessarily have to hide, but once you get in any discussion, that would get pretty weird pretty quick. So.
Yeah, and I think it helps to me to provide a better service to you. So it's not that I want to be, not know who you are or anything like that. But I feel like it makes it difficult for me to provide the same service if, one, I'm tired. Because that's when a lot of boundaries are crossed and mistakes are made, is when you're tired. That's one of the things that we're taught early on. Make sure you take care of yourself so you don't end up making the stupid mistake that gets you or a client messed up. So, I definitely try to guard what's important, which is that time for me, that time to be away, that time to enjoy my family, that time to do all these immense amount of hobbies that I've tried to take on, so I can provide a better service when you are in the room, when it really counts, I'm fully there because I now can be.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So with you, like you said, hearing a lot of negative things, do you compartmentalize? That's one aspect, and you find some ways of, decompressing there with the beach. Do you also talk to other counselors about the things that or what's your personal mental fitness?
Yeah, so I actually have a couple of counselors that work in my department that I talk to pretty regularly. If there's something that's particularly difficult to handle by myself, we're all keeping everything confidential all the time, so nobody's names ever get used or anything like that. But if I'm struggling to carry something, we kind of have this, I don't even know if it's unspoken. We already know that we're going to walk in each other's office and say, hey, this one was tough. What do you think? How can I better help this person? Because this is a bit much for me to carry on my own. We all have these things that trigger stuff in us, which is, I think, another misconception that people may not know is that your counselor has gone through some crap, and so they're always trying to push that stuff to the side because it's not about us. But you still have to recognize it when it happens. If somebody brings up a story that sounds like yours and it starts to trigger things in you, well, how do you resolve that? If that means, okay, once we're done here, I got to go talk to one of the people who I know is pretty fit and able to handle this stuff, then I'm going to do that. One of the things that they also tell us is that we should all have a counselor. Everyone should have a counselor. Which sounds really good for us being able to make a couple of extra dollars. But it's necessary, to have somebody that you can unload some of this stuff on when it becomes a little bit too much for just one person to carry. It's bound to happen. If one person is overloaded and they come to you and they say, this is the stuff that happened to me, and you take that on, there's a strong possibility that plus everything else that you've heard today, it's going to weigh you down too. So at some point, you've got to be able to unload that stuff. And it's not to say that anybody's information is unsafe or, just out there for the world to know, because that's not the way it's handled. But sometimes we have to talk just to, again, provide the perfect care or as good care as we can to those who we're servicing.
And it's odd, the stigma and the taboo-ness of the whole thing, because, we talk about heart health or something, your whole life. You're like, do your cardio 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, make sure you get on the treadmill or whatever. Like, that's just normal every day. But then if you say, like, who's your counselor? Do you have a counselor? Yeah. I don't have a counselor. I don't need that. Yeah. I'm fine. That is really bizarre how even though the head and heart, the mind and heart should probably be in that same category, for some reason we just can't seem to get there. And hopefully through the podcast and having conversations, really hoping we're going to clear up some of this, and, we'll keep having conversations with mental health professionals, which would be really great. Yeah. But I did mention my grandma in this episode, and so I did want to ask the question, did you, in your family, did you discuss mental health growing up?
Oh my gosh. What was that? No, that never came up. It was never talked about. It was not a thing. It was really just, if there was anything mental, anything at all that brought up, it was so and so's crazy. That's all you ever really heard. There was no going deeper into it. You just see somebody who's just different. Usually it was the homeless, you know. You see him and you think, oh, that guy's crazy. He's on the street because he's crazy. And he's crazy because he's on the street. You know, like, but that's as deep as it went. And then I've actually, in the last few years, I've kind of started to take a deeper dive into some of the people who I grew up around and family members and all that stuff to say, maybe something was going on there. You know, there's a strong possibility something was, but nobody diagnosed anything. It wasn't talked about. So now that we're finally getting into a little bit more of a aware society, I think that it is being talked about a little bit more, which is great. But I don't think it's talked about inside the home as much as it should be. To say, hey, you know, grandma's going through something, or mom's going through something, or I'm going through something. Like, it's not really being brought into the home as much as it should be, or the right way. You know, so I think that's kind of the next step that we need to make to kind of make things a little easier to have these conversations, because we have no issue talking about, oh, don't eat that cake. It's going to give you the sweets. You know what I mean? You don't want to get your feet cut off.
Yeah. It's so easy. It's like the body, which is bizarre because the mind is part of the body.
Yeah.
So since you do see families and in the same nature, do you have any tips for a foundation in the home? How do you, if you didn't talk about it at all, could people right now like go home and this week or whatnot, like how do they start that? Because I feel like that's probably, we say it, and that's one of the things I really hope to focus on in this podcast, because I know I've read a lot of leadership books, and they tell you like, this is what these are good ideas, right? But I hope this podcast focus on actionable things like you could go and do, not like, you know, preaching or whatever, like this is ideal. But how do you get there? Ideal is great. And not saying you shouldn't have goals to get to the ideal, but you need steps and things to get there. So how do you lay a foundation or start that conversation if you're not having it in the house right now? So
I would have to say, as a parent, I think one of the best ways to start that conversation is to be open with your kids. Not that they need to be involved in everything that's going on, but if you're having a bad day, you can say that, you know, other than just all of a sudden you're angry and your kids don't know why. You can say, hey, you know, today sucked. You know, these are some of the things that have kind of been rattling through my head, you know, and it's just been kind of difficult for daddy today. So I think me and you need to go for a walk. It's what me and my daughter do kind of regularly, is we go for walks. And I'm just like there to just listen to whatever ramblings she has, you know. So she'll just start to talking, and then she'll hit a lull, and I'll start to talking, and I'll just say, these were the highs of my day. These were the lows, you know. But in that, being able to spend this time with you has been one of the biggest highs. You know, it helps me to get, you know, out of some stuff and to not be sad. But I think that starting that conversation when they're young, to say that it's not always just I'm dad and I'm perfect in every way. You know, I have some tough days. And I think as they mature, you can kind of go into that a little bit more and say, you know, some of the stuff that you went through and all that without being too, you know, over the top with what you're given. I think that helps them to not feel like they're alone when they have their sad days, or when they become anxious about a test and don't know how to manage that. You know, I think that gives you the opportunity to give them some tools, you know, to say, hey, well, this is one of the ways that I dealt with it, because I know that I struggled through some tests every now and then, and just being able to sit down and focus, you know. So I think it starts with just being open with where you are and not feeling like that's a weakness to say, this is what's happening with me.
Yeah, that's a super good point. That's super powerful. The weakness is super unfortunate that it's seen in that way. And it's frustrating too in certain aspects, because you touched on it perfectly, where you're having the tools. And so sometimes it feels like people would like lives that are easy and perfect, but that just makes it more difficult when you do run upon something. Not that we want lives to be super difficult, but we have difficult moments throughout the life. to be able to handle things later on. So you never see it and you never know how to do it. You just kind of break when it comes up. And so that's another good point of this podcast. I hope that we can, push through some of that, because the previous stigma was to, bury it and hide.
Right.
No tools.
Right.
And then you struggle and things are really difficult. And I think this goes back to, like you had said, like with you wanting to take care of marriages, not make marriages just work, but happy and fulfilled.
Right.
So that's the same thing here. We want to make sure people are living happy and full lives, but then also building up some tools and things to conquer it the next time, so that, it was a difficult situation, but at least the next time it'll be less difficult.
Yeah.
I want to ask one question. This is kind of bouncing backwards, but that's kind of how my brain is, the squirrel in there just running around. I have heard, there's certain negative connotations with millennials and Gen Z and X and all this. So earlier you had kind of touched on the thing you see most is anxiety and depression. And I recently was listening to a podcast and they were saying we are more self-aware than we've ever been. So we're aware of our feelings and things like that. And so can you kind of touch on, or maybe dispel a little bit of myth between millennials or younger people being sensitive, or whatever kind of negative term that people use?
Oh boy, I don't know if I can dispel that.
You think we're more sensitive now?
I think we're less prepared. I think we're less prepared now. I think the world has become so aware and sensitive itself that we just see hurt. We have a tendency to really put all of our focus there. Whereas I think before, when folks weren't talking about this as much, you learned to just deal with it. However you deal with it is how you deal with it. Not to say that it was a good way, that's, I think, where a lot of the stories of, oh, my uncle used to drink all the time, but he found something. Not to say it was a good something, but he tried to find a way to resolve that issue. And so I think on the other side of it, we want to find some good things that are not maladaptive, some good ways of handling some of these issues. But I think now we just focus on the issue. Like, I'm mad about this. That hurt me. You hurt me. And I don't know what to do about it, but I'm going to tell everybody that I'm hurt. I'm going to tell everybody that I'm mad. And we just stay there.
But not work on it personally.
Yeah,
everyone needs to work around me.
Yeah. So I think that's more of what's going on. I think this generation, which apparently I'm a part of as a millennial, I try to run from it, but they keep telling me that I'm one too. Either way, I think that's the issue, is that we see the issues, we see the problems, and we talk about them, but we don't have the tools because we're not allowed to work through some of that stuff. And I do feel like, as necessary as having counselors and therapists and psychiatrists and all these folks who deal with head matters, as necessary as they are, we are not plentiful enough. Just not. There's right now, I think since maybe about 2018, there's been this massive influx of people, which this is a good thing. They're looking for services now, but we weren't ready for it. And that even goes down to the laws. There's still not enough regulation across the country. States still have their own individual requirements for people to be licensed and certified. And so that slows down the ability to have people who just get their license when they're getting out of college. Because now we have to do everything that this particular state says. And it might work for Tennessee, but it won't work for Texas or California. Good luck. Because, boy, it sure seems like they don't want any help out there. But that's the issue now, is what does it take to even get in? Like the door is really difficult to get into. So the people are more aware and they're a little bit more willing now. But now the issue is that the legislative side of it wasn't prepared enough. So we're trying to fight that now. There's been some headway made for sure, but it's still a little bit slow in moving. And so that kind of leaves us at a loss.
Government always is a little slow.
Yeah. It's paperwork.
So I want to give you an opportunity as we come here to a close. Do you have any mental fitness tips, tricks, or things that can be used in maybe, a wide range of situations?
So I would love to say yes. One of the things that I've found, I can give you a couple, like say if somebody pops in the door and they're going through something, I can give you the usual, hey, have you tried deep breathing? And as much of a cop out as it sounds like, it's actually not. It is actually something that's helpful. Like I will say to a client, what's the one thing that you do after you go for a run?
Cool down.
Yeah. And you start the deep breathing because that's one of the things that your brain recognizes as a part of returning back to normal. So there's something there. And so you can reverse engineer that and say, hey, if I'm going through something, I'm keyed up, maybe I should try deep breathing. And it actually has been proven to reverse some of those issues. I will say though, that I feel like you have to kind of know you, and I can give you tools, I can give you things, but if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. So in those moments, what do you turn to? Well, what does work? I wouldn't expect my counselor to tell me, hey, you should get into RC cars, man. I feel like this is something for you. It could work. I don't expect him to say that, but for me, it does work to go out and grab my camera and take a picture of something random. That works for me, And so I think the biggest thing is find what works. Keep trying things until you find what works. Obviously, I'm talking about good things, not like cocaine. I don't want anybody to try any of the things that, are maladaptive, but keep trying stuff. If you found out about a new hobby that somebody else is into, give it a shot. Maybe it's crocheting. It could be a really old person type of thing. Give it a shot. Go sit on the patio. Watch the sun go down. Whatever it takes. But ask yourself, is this something that's helping? Is this something that is calming me? Is this something that's resolving some of that stress that I have? Try some things and see what happens.
You never know until you try.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What's one lesson you have learned in this life? So not necessarily mental fitness specific, but what's one lesson you've learned in this life that you think everyone should know? Maybe learned it the hard way.
I think one lesson is that if you listen to other people, you don't have to live everybody's problem.
Let them live the mistake.
Yeah. So I can have my mistakes that I've made and I can have gained the experience and the knowledge from that. But if I listen to other people and see, well, how did you get through that? What happened there? That gives me the opportunity to gain insight without having to go through it myself.
Not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it offers us the opportunity to also put ourselves in the shoes of other people, which helps us to better have patience with people. I think we usually lean towards being upset by others quicker than we lean towards understanding them. And once you take the time out to understand someone else's life and why it goes the way it goes and why they made the decisions that they made, I think it helps you to add to yourself, and it also adds patience to our society.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Ryan Holiday, he mentions that. He's an author, and he says, I don't have to know everything, but there's all these books that are written by people that are much smarter and much, completely paraphrasing him. But he's like, they're already out there. They've lived. They've made good things. They've lived, terrible mistakes. And I get to read, and then I get to learn from them. So I don't have to be the smartest, but I read some of these books, and why do it again? They already did it. Yeah. So that's a really good example. And then last thing we got is last words of wisdom. What do you want to say? Parting notes for everyone.
Oh, boy. Hit me with an extra. I see what you did there. Let's see. I'll say talk to somebody you wouldn't normally talk to. I think that'll be the word of wisdom. Because there's way more wisdom out there than we can gain in our one lifetime. Going back to what I said last There are other people out here who've lived lives and they've done things. There's wisdom there. But I feel like if you surround yourself with people who only think like you, who only do the things that you do, who only look like you're going to have a very narrow view of society and what your world is. And everybody who's not like that just looks like the enemy. And so I think it's important to have people who are completely different from you. And instead of telling them to shut up, listen to what they have to say with ears to understand.
Perspective is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, Larry. This is Mind Matters, the podcast on love, life, and learning, and I'm so glad you came out. We're just going to keep having a lot of serious conversations with people, and mental fitness is the name of the game. So we're just going to keep having these conversations, clear up some of the stigma. If you or anyone you know is struggling or having a rough time and needs to reach out to anyone, reach out to myself or anyone else you've heard on the show, and we'll get you taken care of. There's always the new mental health hotline and various other ways. So please make sure if you're feeling if you're at a low point, make sure you're getting some help. But that's it for today. See ya.